So this is the first video of a 4-day lesson. Each one is about adding and subtracting decimals. Starts with adding tenths, then adding hundredths, then subtracting tenths and subtracting hundredths. Take about a week. Okay, it'll be 4 days over the course of a week to be able to cover all 4 different concepts. This is the first slide. Each one's going to be a Smart Notebook file. This is adding tenths, and the first page is always going to have the objectives so students know what they're going to be learning and what's going to be asked of them. In this case, it's going to be 7 out of 9 addition problems. It's also important to notice here, whenever time they see the pentagon, they're asked to pause the video and solve this problem in their notebook. So that way they're not just watching and listening, they're actually being able to try something and practice them out. And then once they restart the video, the explanation of that exact problem will be there, just to clear up any clarifications to make sure they did it the right way. So that is that. First slide is going to be reviewing decimal place value. They would have done this ahead of time. They should know tens and ones. For example, if you have 3 tens and 4 ones and 7 tenths, that would be 34 and 7 tenths. They should know that. They should be familiar with that. And place value as far as tenths at this point. The first couple problems would be vertical. It's very easy when it's set up vertical. The decimals are already lined up, which, as shown by the next slide, is sometimes a challenge for these problems. Other than that, it's pretty much the same as standard addition, as long as they remember to bring the decimal point down, which would certainly be emphasized. So here are 2 problems that we modeled for them, and then this one they would be asked to do on their own in the notebook. And if they pause the video, they would solve it, and then they'd restart the video, and it would go through step by step just to make sure they got that one right. The next slide would be giving them horizontal problems. The key thing for them to remember is that they would need to rewrite it in vertical form and to make sure that the decimals are lined up. That's the biggest issue with all 4 of these lessons. They just kind of put the decimal wherever it goes, and they have to make sure that ones are lined up with ones, tenths with tenths, and later on hundredths with hundredths. So there would be 3 problems that we modeled for them. A 4th they'd be asked to complete with the video pause, and then the steps would be given to them to ensure that they did it correctly. This is one little fun activity like the vortex, the spinning vortex. So they have to look at the pictures and decide whether the decimal is lined up or not lined up. This one's a little tricky because it's actually 5 holes, so that's definitely not lined up because the 5 should be underneath the 2. So you drag that into not lined up, and it sucks it into the vortex. If you get it wrong, for example, this one, they are lined up. If I put it not lined up, it spins it around and kicks it back out to you, so you'd be able to go through there. Okay, that's a lined up, and that's a not lined up. Slide after that. Placeholder zeros become important because, as they see, once they set this one up, if they do 2, they would say, well, there's nothing here. Okay, so we have to teach them that the decimal point after a whole number would be here, and you can put in what we call the invisible 0, the placeholder 0, and solve it that way. And they go through that same thing. Again, here's one for them to do themselves. We also have the screen here to hide some of the problems. These ones are in vertical form. It's a little bit easier, but we still want them to get practice putting in the, again, what we call the invisible 0 and going from there and adding them up. Once they get those, there's some practice problems for them to do. We would want them to do it in their math notebook. They would bring it to the class next day. It's kind of proof that they, watch the video, but also tried some of the problems on their own. And the following day would be a responder quiz each morning. And we'd set up a responder quiz to go over the concept earlier, which would then give us the data to decide when we break up into small groups who we would be spending time with and who we would be working with a little bit more. So that would be the first day's lesson. That would be adding tenths, and then on to the next day's lesson.